I'm a main
So I'd like to welcome you to this event this afternoon to celebrate with us at IIHR Hydroscience and Engineering in the Iowa Flood Center a very historic project that we've had many faculty, staff, and students that have contributed to over the last 6 years. My name is Larry Weber. I'm the director of IIHR Hydroscience and Engineering, and I'll introduce a few of my colleagues here in a couple minutes. But first, I would just like to open our session this afternoon by thanking the Iowa Legislature for their continued support of the Iowa Flood Center and programs at IIHR Hydroscience and Engineering. These are very important programs here, both within our research program as well as to the University of Iowa, showing an opportunity for our faculty, staff, and students to engage in societally relevant research that contributes to our state. And I think none more so than in the Iowa Flood Center. It's been a tremendous opportunity for many of us over the last 7 years or so to be able to impact the state in such a positive way through these research programs. And it really shows this perfect balance between the higher level learning and educational opportunities that we have at the University of Iowa and our ability to make that relevant to the state of Iowa. So, we continue to serve the state in that way, and to me as the director of IIHR, it's been just an absolutely wonderful process to see the past 8 years or so following the 2008 floods, the way that our team has really stepped forward and served the state of Iowa in this way, both in terms of flooding, but more recently as we continue to advance our programs in water quality related research. Both of these water quantity and water quality topics are very relevant in our state and will continue to be so over the next many years. We have a number of special guests with us today that I would like to recognize. From our state legislature, we have State Senator Joe Bolcom, who also serves with us in a communications capacity at the Iowa Flood Center. State Senator Bob Dvorsky is here. Bob, raise your hand, thank you. And Representative Mary Masher. If we could please help me in thanking them. For their wonderful and continuous support of the Iowa Flood Center. Also, David Lesh is here representing Congressman Rotzak's office, David. And we'd also like to thank the Congressman for his continued support to try to advance our work from within the borders of the state of Iowa to having an impact across our nation. And Congressman Rotzak has always been a tremendous advocate for the Iowa Flood Center, and we're very happy to continue serving his district. So let's thank David Lesh. We have a couple other partners. Dwayne Sand is here, formerly with Dwayne, thank you. The Iowa Natural Heritage Foundation, still on contract with them. Dwayne has been a tremendous advocate for the statewide mapping program that we'll celebrate today. Dwayne has really done tremendous outreach work on our behalf to get these maps out, in particular in agricultural areas, and trying to intersect conservation practices and agricultural best management practices with the recurrence levels of flows and flooding. So again, Dwayne, I'd like to thank you personally for the support that you've shared with our program. And Dave Frantzman, Dave is here. If we could have Dave just recognized, we often see Dave out in the wild, blustery, weather, whatever is impacting, parts of our region. But as our program continues to help prepare Iowans for flooding and flood events, we do greatly appreciate the media, their use of the Iowa Flood Information System and the products that we've created. So again, thanks to David for that. With that, just a couple other folks that I'd like to acknowledge. The team here, they're scattered throughout the room today, but this project has been the work of many. And we've had a very diligent work from students in the beginning of the program. Many of those students went on to become staff members of the Iowa Flood Center. Several of them had the opportunity to impact their local communities, and so we really saw that, again, as a tremendous opportunity for our students to engage in relevant work in Iowa, and sometimes really providing a benefit back to their local communities. And so the students that then became the staff, and the staff that did the very diligent work to complete this 6-year program across the state. It's one that has been held up as one of the crowning achievements of the Flood Center, along with many other things. And with that, I'd like to introduce Dr. Vitek Krajewski, who is the director of the Iowa Flood Center, to say a few words.
Thank you, Larry. Welcome to our celebration of this important project. And as we are nearing the completion of this program, it is also time for some reflection. And I will not take long, but I do recall early discussions that I had with Larry and with Nate Young, who will follow me here and give you all the details. So we were debating whether we should make ourselves viable for conducting, this project. And the main point of hesitation was recognition that there would be a lot of repetitions in a project like this. And so we question whether it is appropriate for a research organization. But I'm happy to say that our discussions were not very long. We quickly considered all the pros and cons, and the pros won by a landslide, I can say. So we very early on we recognized the benefits that would come with undertaking such large project. After all, repetition is a good drilling mechanism for students. So we all know that. So that's accomplished. Also, early on, we recognized that if we do this project, not only that Iowans will receive something of high quality and uniform standards, but also we early on we created a technical innovation of what to do with these maps, and we are still not there. You will see it's coming, but now that the mapping of the entire state is complete, we will put them to use that goes beyond the original intent. And so just to not keep you wondering, I will say that we are working now on including these maps into our real-time flood forecasting system. And so the forecast will be in the form of the maps. And this would be a first anywhere. So I do not know of any other organization that is involved in real-time stream flow forecasting that does this. So in that respect, I think we are about 5 to 10 years ahead of the activities that are going on at the National Water Center that was given by U.S. Congress to the state of Alabama. And so, anyway, numerous benefits for Iowans, for our center. We are not done yet, and after Nate presents the work that we have accomplished here, I'll be happy to elaborate. So welcome again. And so now Nate Young, Dr. Nate Young, who is Associate Director of the Iowa Flood Center, he will present the technical aspects of our work.
Thanks, Vitek, and thank you everybody for coming today. It's been a long and exciting journey for a lot of us here in the room. It's great to look back and appreciate all the things that we've accomplished. So today I just wanted to give a little bit of background on the project, talk about some of the things that we've produced, and then recognize everyone that's really contributed to the project. So the project really began clear back in 2007, before the 2008 flood, and before the creation of the Iowa Flood Center. The Iowa DNR, Iowa DOT, the USGS, and other state and federal entities working within the state of Iowa recognized the need for better topography in the state. So you can see on the left there is the typical USGS 30-meter digital elevation model, which we used to use to represent the topography of the state. This would be used for floodplain mapping, as well as a variety of other purposes. And those agencies recognized an opportunity to collect LiDAR data statewide. So you can see the stark contrast between prior to 2007, the USGS DEM and the LiDAR data that we now have that we were able to take advantage of in this project and really provide improved floodplain mapping products. Shortly following the beginning of that project, we experienced the 2008 flood. This is the flood here in Iowa City. And that not only created the Iowa Flood Center, but also directed a lot of federal funding to the state of Iowa. $15 million of which was in the form of HUD's CDBG grant to update or create new floodplain maps statewide. As of 2009, this is the status of the floodplain maps in the state prior to our project. You can see much of the data is very outdated, almost 40 years old in some cases, only available in paper form, so no digital information. And many counties in the state were not fully covered, but only had individual communities that were covered by the floodplain mapping available through FEMA. So this was a great opportunity for us to, as VTech said, create a uniform and comprehensive data set for the entire state, identifying our flood hazards. So, as I mentioned, this is a community block development grant, 6.5-year project for the flood center, $15 million to the state, $12.5 million of which came to the flood center to support our staff. The project was administered financially by IDA and directed by IDNR, with whom we created a very close partnership. The goal was to create floodplain data for every stream draining greater than 1 square mile within the state. It could be used for planning and management, but would also be developed consistent with FEMA standards, so when the opportunity presented itself, our data could be adopted by FEMA and utilized in the National Flood Insurance Program. I'll speak to that a little bit more. We perform the majority of the engineering and GIS analyses for the state here at the Flood Center, but there are also significant contributions from the Corps of Engineers, Rock Island, and Omaha districts, as well as several private engineering companies under the supervision of IDNR. Part of the constraints that were tied to the HUD money were that we could only work in disaster-declared counties following the 2008 flood. So only 85 of the 99 Iowa counties were eligible, which created kind of a challenge for IDNR and the Flood Center to get this comprehensive data set. Luckily, we were able to partner with the Corps of Engineers, and through public assistance to states funds, that's a funding mechanism internal to the Corps of Engineers. It's awarded annually to different Corps of Engineers districts. They were able to commit their resources to help us complete the state. So you can see the green to the blue shading are all the watersheds in the state that the Iowa Flood Center took on. And then as a result of that limitation in the HUD funding, the Corps of Engineers stepped in and took the northwest corner of the state and the Skunk River watershed there in the southeast. As part of the project, we tracked our progress in 4 steps, the first being hydrography, where we went through and digitized all the stream center lines and bank lines in the state to be consistent with the LiDAR data. Previous to that, the line work available for the state was at a very coarse scale and had been developed in the 1980s and before, so it needed to be updated, needed to be more accurate to match the accuracy of the LiDAR data for us to perform our analyses. The next phase was hydrology. We used USGS regional regression methodology to estimate stream flows in all of the streams that we had delineated, and use that as input into hydraulic models, which we built for every one of the streams in the state to estimate the water surface elevations and extent of the floodplain boundaries for each one of our streams. Finally, using that information, we intersected the water surface profiles with the LiDAR data representing the topography to establish the floodplain boundaries and inundation depths. This is the current status of the project. You can see all the Iowa Flood Center watersheds are essentially completed. The project's scheduled to end on December 31st. We're a little bit ahead of the game and have been able to go back and do some added value work in a few communities. And then the Corps of Engineers are complete through hydraulics. Unfortunately, because of that public assistance to states funding is a little uncertain and awarded annually, it's difficult for them to allocate resources and plan ahead. So they've unfortunately been lagging behind just a little bit. But the hope is in this next year we'll have a complete data set for the entire state. We communicate the products of our efforts through a web interface. It's available online. I'd just like to demonstrate real briefly. If you navigate to iowafloodmaps.org, that'll bring up our homepage where you can learn more about the project, get more details. But on the left-hand side, there's two mapping interfaces, the first of which show the 100 and 500-year floodplain delineations, which were the base product that we agreed to produce as part of the IDNR contract. If you're familiar with the Iowa Flood Information System that the Flood Center has created, this interface is very similar. It allows you to view our floodplain products organized by county, because that's how FEMA and the Flood Insurance Program organize their information. If you zoom out, you'll see that although we have the entire state completed, not all of the state's data are currently available in the interface. But you can see there are different levels of completeness or final products. The first being the draft flood hazard products that are meant for informational planning purposes within the state, shown in red. And then preliminary and effective flood insurance rate maps. So these are counties where our data have been taken by FEMA, reviewed, and adopted for the National Flood Insurance Program. You can zoom into any one of these counties and view, I'll just show you a few different things. So, sorry, never failed to zoom into something. Need to bring up right away. So, for the areas that we've started working in from scratch, you'll find the 100-year floodplain delineated in blue, the 500-year floodplain delineated in orange. And then in areas where there are preceding studies that were performed with more detail by FEMA and their contractors, we've essentially adopted those data and redelineated the boundaries using the LiDAR information. So we've improved the boundary while maintaining all the engineering information that had been created in the past. And you can see those in the crosshatched areas. About halfway through the project, we were engaged by Dwayne Sand and the Iowa Natural Heritage Foundation. Dwayne saw value beyond just floodplain boundaries in our mapping data and presented us with an opportunity to develop our flood risk management maps. So these have the same coverage but provide some additional information beyond the typical regulatory data that FEMA and regulatory agencies typically use. We organize these by watershed. So in this case, I can zoom in to Old Mains Creek, a little closer to home. And now rather than just showing the 100 and 500-year floodplain boundaries, we've taken the funding from the Iowa Natural Heritage Foundation and we've been able to clean up all the data for the 2, 5, 10, 25, 50, 200, and 100 and 500-year floodplains. So now we can show not only those two data points, but a gradient of flood risk across the floodplain. So in this image, you can see the 2-year flood, which is essentially in bank in dark red, moving out to the 500-year flood on the fringe of the floodplain in dark blue. We also have been able to post-process our data to generate flood depth grids for each one of our return periods. So now not only are we able to look at floodplain boundaries, but also depth of flooding. And then finally, the original goal of the Natural Heritage Foundation effort was to delineate areas in the floodplain that are at risk for soil loss due to floodplain scour. You can see these delineated in pink as moderate scour risk areas where landowners might consider alternative land cover options, perennial vegetation or floodplain forest that Dwayne has used in his outreach efforts with landowners across the state. So returning to my presentation. So at the end of the project, we'll have statewide coverage for the draft flood hazard map showing the 100 and 500-year floodplain boundaries, as well as the flood risk management maps that I've shown you. The DNR has been able to leverage all the work that we've done in the state with FEMA to get 75 of our 99 counties adopted as flood insurance rate maps. That's in process. So in the next couple of years, we'll have a large portion of the state covered with flood insurance rate maps, and a lot more communities now eligible to participate in the National Flood Insurance Program as a result of our efforts. And then we've also had several watersheds, plus Polk County, use our data to develop FEMA risk map products, which are non-regulatory products intended to communicate flood risk and be used for floodplain management and planning. So with that, I just wanted to finish by recognizing all the people, hopefully all the people, I hope I haven't left out anyone, who have contributed to the project, beginning with our program partners external to the Flood Center at DNR. I don't know if any of them are present. If anyone from DNR other than the core floodplain mapping team are here, if you could stand and be recognized. No. Dwayne Sands, who's been mentioned, from Iowa Natural Heritage Foundation, whose leadership led us to the development of the flood risk management maps. Several people from the Omaha District and Rock Island District of the Corps of Engineers, some of whom I believe were able to make it today. Several individuals at FEMA who helped to guide the program. And then moving on to some folks internal to IIHR and the Iowa Flood Center, IIHR administrative and research staff who on the periphery helped to manage the project and drive it forward, as well as a host of IIHR students who had the opportunity to participate in the project and learn a lot about floodplain mapping, hydraulics, hydrology, and other related issues. So anyone who's participated in the project, again, apart from the core team, if you could stand and be recognized. Just Larry Vitek. On the slide, even though you're a little bit shy, I appreciate all of your efforts. And then finally, the core team for the statewide floodplain mapping program, Chris Colley and Scott Ralston, who are our close partners and helped not only supervise the overall project, but participated heavily in all the work that the Flood Center did. And then all of the GIS staff and engineering staff that have committed up to 6.5 years of their lives to this project in helping the state to recognize and better understand their flood risks and hopefully start to mitigate a lot of those risks here in the future. So you guys can stand to be recognized, please. I'd like to direct you to, again, iowafloodmaps.org to learn a little bit more about the project. If you're interested, access the information and look for all the data from the various watersheds and counties to start appearing here very soon as the project is across to a close. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer anything you might have, or we can just move on to refreshments. All right, refreshments then. Thank you very much.